It's exciting. It's good. It's it's a role that I think somebody needs to do at Holborn. Holborn's background is Middle Eastern based, obviously grown very, very quickly over the last 5-6 years or so, and are now, a big global player. And I think it's been quite evident on kind of both sides, both head office and kind of the central management team, and then, out in the field at advisor and the regional managers level. There's kind of been a bit of a gap where somebody needs to kind of bridge that communication between the two sides. So yeah, it's good. It's a natural step for me to kind of move into this role. I've looked after Hong Kong obviously previously and been out in Asia for 12 years or so. I know the different areas that that I cover out here. I know a lot of the managers and some of the IFAs around the region as well. So yeah, it's been a good fit. It's busy, plenty of time on Zoom and lots of time figuring out different time zones and stuff and stuff like that. But it's been really, really good. As I say, to be able to kind of support the managers and support the IFAs around the region at this time as well, I think it's been important. There's obviously a lot of change going on from a regulatory perspective worldwide, and then against obviously the backdrop of COVID. So yeah, it's been a busy time, but a good one as well. It's an interesting one because we've obviously all had to react and change quickly to the ways that we do business, not just in the region out here in Asia, but globally. So obviously everybody's had to get used to Zoom very quickly. Adobe Signs helped speed things up when it comes to, paperwork. And I think probably even before all of that, you've got to look at kind of what the drivers are for people who want to engage with financial service and financial advisors globally. And more, we're hearing the story from right across the globe that people are wanting to talk to financial advisors, wanting to reassess their financial situations and their own goals and what they're trying to achieve, whether that's through, forced change from their own personal or professional point of view, or just a bit of reassurance that they are in good shape from a financial perspective. I think it's forced everybody to kind of reassess. Our figures were up globally last year, I think around about 12%. We're seeing similar growth rates this year again, both in the region and globally. And like I say, the story, the feedback from most advisors and clients is that that's coming from people kind of wanting to reassess life, what's important to them. Can't ignore COVID, right? So that, I think, in some ways has been a bit of a blessing in disguise for the authorities here in Hong Kong, with all the protests that were going on the street. COVID and the social distancing rules, and although we were quite lucky here that we didn't have as brutal a lockdown as some of the places around the world have seen, certainly not for as long a period of time. It's obviously had an impact. The big crowds that you would see gathering on the street in the midst of the protests simply not being allowed through COVID. So I think, in some ways, as I say, that's been a bit of a blessing in disguise. Certainly we don't see those the protests and the unrest on the street that we did. And the second part of your question, in terms of how it's affected business, again, it's difficult to say really. If people were thinking about leaving Hong Kong because of the protests, because of the unrest, that may have been masked or covered a little bit with COVID and the impact of that, which has kind of overruled everything. I think from a business flows perspective, the clear and obvious one is that there's no new arrivals in Hong Kong. The borders have been closed here for a long time now to anybody who doesn't have a visa or isn't permanent resident. So we certainly don't see any new arrivals. And from a business perspective, that's historically always been a part of every financial advisor's business, right? New people arriving, wanting to assess and set up and set their new financial plans. But that's not to say that there's, I think Hong Kong will always remain a big financial centre. You know, you can see out the window, there's huge infrastructure here. Banks are all here. There's huge business here. So we're always going to have a big market. And yeah, we still see very strong business flows both here in Hong Kong. Interestingly, from a Holborn perspective, you know, we're quite nicely placed really, because when people are talking about relocating maybe away from Hong Kong, it's often to other places within Asia. So we've got that big advantage. Of course, we can continue to plan for those people through the regional offices and pick up some of that, you know, that overflow, if you like, or that movement. So yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. Certainly changes both here in Hong Kong and across the world, right?